I spent 3 years fighting cancer, lost 80 pounds, and ended up in a wheelchair. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own children looked me in the eye at Olive Garden and told their friends I was just some distant relative helping out. That night, I made a decision that would change their lives forever, and they had no idea what was coming. You see, when your own flesh and blood treats you like a stranger because you don't look the way they want you to anymore, something breaks inside you, something that can't be fixed with apologies or tears. I had given them everything, my health, my savings, my entire life, and in return, they gave me shame. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a mother's unconditional love turned into the most expensive lesson my children would ever learn. The irony, they thought they were protecting their image that night. What they actually did was sign away their future. Because while they were busy pretending I didn't exist, I was already planning to make that fantasy a reality in the most permanent way possible. My name is Margaret. I'm 54 years old, and until 3 years ago, I thought I had the perfect family. I was a single mother who raised 3 kids, Emma 22, David 24, and Sarah 26. After their father walked out when Sarah was just 8, I worked 2 jobs for 15 years, sometimes sleeping only 4 hours a night to make sure they had everything they needed. I was the mom who never missed a soccer game, even when I was dead tired from my night shift at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. I was the one who saved every penny to send them to good schools, who went without new clothes for years so they could have the latest gadgets. When Emma wanted to take expensive art classes, I picked up weekend shifts. When David needed a car for college, I took out a loan I'm still paying off. When Sarah wanted that dream wedding, I emptied my retirement savings. But I didn't mind. That's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice because we love unconditionally. I genuinely believed that all those years of putting them first, of being their biggest cheerleader, of being the parent who said yes when everyone else said no, would create an unbreakable bond between us. I was proud of who they'd become. Emma was finishing her art degree, David was working at a tech startup, and Sarah was married with a beautiful home. They all seemed successful, confident, and independent. I thought I'd done something right. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy that made me lose all my hair, radiation that left me exhausted, and complications that led to nerve damage in my legs. I went from being an active, energetic woman who could work 12-hour shifts to someone who needed a wheelchair to get around and had gained significant weight from the medications. My children were supportive during the treatment, or so I thought. They visited me in the hospital, helped with some appointments, and Emma even shaved her head in solidarity when I lost my hair. I was so grateful for their love during the darkest period of my life, but everything started to change after I went into remission. It was subtle at first. Little comments about how I should try harder to get back to my old self. Sarah suggested I look into weight loss surgery. David bought me a gym membership for my birthday, which felt more like a hint than a gift. Emma started making excuses about why she couldn't visit as often. I began to notice how they acted when we were in public together. They'd walk a few steps ahead, avoid physical contact, and seemed uncomfortable when I needed help with doors or getting in and out of cars. At first I told myself they were just adjusting to my new reality, just like I was. The first real red flag came during Sarah's birthday dinner at an upscale restaurant 6 months ago. When the hostess asked if I needed assistance with my wheelchair, Sarah quickly said, "She's fine. She can manage," in a tone that suggested I was being dramatic. Throughout the dinner, she kept making comments about how I should push through my limitations and not let the cancer define me. David started bringing up stories about other cancer survivors who had bounced back completely and returned to their normal lives. The implication was clear. I wasn't trying hard enough. Emma began suggesting I wear makeup more often and maybe invest in some nicer clothes that fit better. I started to realize that my children were embarrassed by me, not by my illness. They could handle that when it was temporary and garnered sympathy. They were embarrassed by my recovery, by the permanent changes, by the fact that their mother no longer looked like the put-together woman who had raised them. The breaking point came when I overheard Sarah on the phone with her husband talking about their upcoming anniversary party. She said, "I just don't know if we should invite Mom. I mean, she's going to need help getting around, and honestly, she doesn't really fit the vibe we're going for." That's when I understood. I had become an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a reminder of vulnerability they didn't want to acknowledge. The incidents became more frequent and more painful. During Emma's art gallery opening, she introduced me to her friends as Margaret, without mentioning I was her mother. When I corrected her, she laughed nervously and said, "Oh, right, this is my mom." But the damage was done. I could see the surprise on people's faces. They couldn't believe this was the mother of the vibrant, beautiful young artist. David stopped inviting me to his work events entirely. When I asked why, he said, "It's just easier, Mom. These are networking events, and I need to focus on making connections." Translation: I was a liability to his professional image. The worst incident happened at Sarah's neighborhood barbecue. I was sitting in my wheelchair, chatting with some of the other parents, when a group of Sarah's friends approached. One of them made a comment about how inspiring it was that Sarah was so good with disabled people. Before I could respond, Sarah jumped in and said, "Oh, Margaret's not really disabled. She just uses the wheelchair sometimes for convenience." I watched my daughter minimize my struggle, my pain, my reality, just to make her friends more comfortable. When I tried to speak up, she quickly changed the subject and wheeled me away, whispering harshly, "Mom, please don't make this about you." That night, I went home and cried for hours, not because of the cancer, not because of the pain, but because I finally understood that the children I had sacrificed everything for were ashamed of me. I started paying closer attention to their behavior, and what I discovered broke my heart. They had created a version of me that existed only in their conversations with others, a version where I was doing great, back to normal, and stronger than ever. The real me, the one who struggled with stairs and needed help reaching high shelves, was someone they wanted to hide. I began to feel like a stranger in my own family. They loved the idea of me, the memory of who I used to be, but they couldn't accept who I had become. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I had just received news that I was officially 5 years cancer-free, a huge milestone that I wanted to celebrate with my children. I suggested we go to Olive Garden, the same restaurant where I had taken them for special occasions when they were kids. It held beautiful memories for me, and I thought it would be perfect for this celebration. All 3 of them agreed to come, though I could sense their reluctance. When we arrived, I was in my wheelchair as usual, and I could see them exchanging glances as I struggled a bit getting through the door. We were seated, and I was so happy to have all my children together. I was telling them about the doctor's report when I noticed a group of young people at a nearby table. Emma suddenly tensed up and whispered, "Oh no, those are people from my art program." Before I could process what was happening, the group approached our table. "Emma, David, Sarah, what a coincidence," one of them said cheerfully. That's when it happened, the moment that changed everything. "Who's this?" one of the girls asked, gesturing toward me with a smile. I'll never forget the look that passed between my children. It was a look of panic, embarrassment, and calculation. Then Emma spoke the words that shattered my heart. "Oh, this is Margaret. She's a distant relative who's been helping our family out. Kind of like a family friend." David nodded quickly. "Yeah, she's been really supportive during some tough times." Sarah added, "We're just treating her to dinner to say thank you." I sat there in stunned silence as my own children erased me from their lives in real time. The group chatted for a few more minutes, and I watched my kids laugh and joke as if I were invisible. When the friends left, none of my children looked at me. Finally, I found my voice. "Distant relative?" Emma wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, please understand. It's just easier this way." "Easier than what? Than admitting I'm your mother?" "You don't understand the pressure we're under," David said. "People have expectations." I looked at Sarah, my eldest, hoping she would be the voice of reason. Instead, she said, "Mom, you have to admit, you're not exactly the same person you used to be." That's when I knew. I knew that no amount of love, sacrifice, or devotion could overcome their shame. I knew that I had raised 3 strangers who valued appearance over substance, image over loyalty. I quietly asked for the check, paid for the dinner they couldn't even finish, and left without another word. The next morning, I called my lawyer. By noon, I had rewritten my will, removing all 3 of my children as beneficiaries. My house, my savings, my life insurance. Everything went to the Cancer Research Foundation that had saved my life and the children's hospital where I had volunteered for years. But I didn't stop there. I also wrote 3 letters, one for each of my children, to be delivered only after my death. In those letters, I detailed every sacrifice I had made for them, every time I had put their needs before my own, and how their shame had broken something in me that could never be repaired. 2 weeks later, Emma called me crying. She had seen photos from her art program's social media, where someone had tagged her in a post about family support and mentioned how sweet it was that she was helping a family friend. The lie had grown legs, and now she was trapped in it. "Mom, I made a mistake," she sobbed over the phone. "I was just embarrassed, and I didn't know how to handle it." David called the next day with a similar story. His co-workers had heard about his charitable work with a disabled family friend and were impressed by his kindness. He realized how twisted the situation had become. Sarah was the last to crack. She called me after her mother-in-law asked why she never mentioned having such a generous mother who had raised 3 successful children as a single parent. Sarah had been forced to admit the truth, and her mother-in-law was appalled. "We want to make this right," Sarah said during a family meeting they had requested. "We know we hurt you, and we're sorry." But as I looked at their faces, I realized something profound. They weren't sorry for hurting me. They were sorry for the consequences of their actions. They were sorry that their lives had become complicated. They were sorry that people were asking questions. "I need you to understand something," I told them calmly. "You didn't just hurt my feelings that night. You erased me. You decided that the mother who gave you everything wasn't worthy of being acknowledged as your family." They tried to interrupt, to explain, to justify, but I held up my hand. "I've made some changes," I continued. "Changes that reflect how you truly see me, as someone who doesn't really matter in your lives." I never told them about the will. I figured they would find out eventually, and when they did, they would understand the full weight of their choices. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life around people who valued me for who I am now, not who I used to be. I started volunteering more at the children's hospital, where kids with cancer looked at me and saw someone who understood their struggle. I joined a support group for cancer survivors, where my wheelchair wasn't a source of shame, but a symbol of survival. I began dating again, something I hadn't done in years, and met wonderful people who saw my strength, not my limitations. 6 months later, I received a call from my lawyer. Sarah had contacted his office, asking about my estate planning. Apparently, she had been talking to a financial advisor about her inheritance and wanted to make sure everything was in order. The lawyer, bound by confidentiality, simply told her that my affairs were current and properly documented. That call told me everything I needed to know. Even after everything that had happened, my children still saw me primarily as a source of financial security. They had apologized not out of genuine remorse, but out of fear that their behavior might have consequences. I realized that I had spent so many years being the mother I thought they needed that I had forgotten to teach them how to be the children I deserved. I had given them everything without requiring anything in return, and in doing so, I had raised people who believed love was a one-way street. The truth is, I don't regret changing my will. My money will go to organizations that fight the disease that changed my life and help children who are facing the same battles I faced. It will make a difference in the world, rather than simply enabling 3 adults who never learned to value what they had. I've learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting unconditional disrespect. I've learned that being a good mother sometimes means letting your children face the consequences of their choices. Most importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't determined by how others see me, even if those others are the children I raised. To anyone reading this who has ever felt invisible, diminished, or ashamed because of illness, disability, or any change that makes you different, you are not less than you were before. You are not a burden. You are not an embarrassment. You are a human being deserving of love, respect, and dignity. And to the children out there who might be reading this, remember that your parents are people too. They have feelings, dreams, and fears just like you do. The person who sacrificed for you, who loved you unconditionally, who shaped you into who you are today, deserves better than your shame. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about family relationships? Have you ever felt like you had to choose between loyalty and image? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.